is it beautiful out here. Fall is finally here. It's a nice 50 degrees today. Got the chainsaw out and it's time to cut some wood for the winter. Over time, these blades on the chainsaws get loose and you've got to retighten them. They just kind of work themselves loose. Some of it's from wear and tear and some of it's from the mechanism backing away. Ever since humans started raising buffalo well over 100 years ago, the question has been asked, how do you move them from pasture to pasture? How do you get them into a corral to work them once or twice a year? And how do you get them to go where us ranchers want them to go? Traditionally, over thousands of years, domestic cattle and sheep have been worked with working cattle dogs. The most recent breed that humans have used, and most common, I would say, would be the Australian Shepherd. These dogs are known for their intellect, their agility, and just their flat-out drive to actually work cattle. They enjoy it. They love being out there and being the boss and chasing these cattle where they want them to go. During the 1970s and 80s, the number of buffalo in our national parks really rose. It was really good for the bison community, but it posed a danger for campers and hikers. The buffalo were not only in the fields, but they were actually going into the campgrounds, they were grazing, and they were getting a little bit too close to some of the campers, and not really too much fault of the campers, but they really didn't know how to interact with the buffalo. When a big creature like that comes in and doesn't seem aggressive, you tend to think that it might be friendly. Well, that kind of posed a danger with the campers and the hikers. In 1987, the year I was actually born, the Department of Interior decided to see if they could do something about this problem. The first thing that came to mind was wondering if they could bring in cattle working dogs like Australian Shepherds and see if they could drive them even just a couple hundred yards away from the campgrounds. Maybe they could create a habit to where the buffalo just didn't like to be in the campgrounds. First, we need to understand something about buffalo. They have a really good memory, and when they get mad, they hold a grudge. They can stay mad for a long time, and when they're mad, they can stomp the living tar out of anything. They are very dangerous when they get mad. As a whole, a buffalo herd is really mellow, but there's certain things about buffalo, like when a cow has its calf, it's really protective. Just like how beef cows are, they do the same thing. While the cows can be really protective from their calves, if you are not really in any distance from that calf, they're really not gonna mess with you. There is one kind of buffalo that's a little bit of a wild card, and that's the adult male buffalo that lost the battle. The one that lost the battle and he's been driven from his herd. So he's alone by himself and he's got a fight to pick, not only with his herd, but with everyone. And those ones can be really dangerous if they're not handled correctly. And ironically, those are the ones that want to wander into a campsite because they don't care about anything and anyone. And anytime you want to go push them, they will get mad. Before starting the project, the department decided to talk to some bison experts, fortunately. Well, those experts said that they thought that the animals would be killed. Well, after talking a long time about it and trying to decide what to do, they ultimately decided to pull the trigger and try it. They hadn't heard of anyone else trying to work buffalo with dogs, and they thought this might be the ultimate test. But they would have to pick the perfect dog. It would have to be one that had heart. It would have to be one that worked a lot of rough cows in the past and really knew what they were doing. So they ultimately assembled the A-team of working dogs. They loaded up on a rainy morning and headed off to the first location. It was a beautiful meadow surrounded by woods, and sure enough, there was a lone bull in the center minding his own business and didn't even take notice that everyone came. And by everyone, I mean everyone. There were cameramen. There were the dog's owners. To begin with, they decided to try Leo. Leo was a really good, solid anchor dog. He was just a magnificent animal, but he didn't really like to take chances. So they thought he would be a great example and keeping everyone safe to see what this buffalo would do. Leo moved in towards that buffalo's head, and sure enough, that buffalo got angry instantly. he charged Leo. But Leo was quick and he managed to dodge the buffalo. He then worked his way around the back end of the buffalo to create pressure from behind, like you would any domestic cattle or sheep. But the problem that this posed was that cattle and sheep don't act like buffalo from behind. When a bull beef cow pivots, it typically pivots on its back legs. It pivots on its back legs and it turns into the threat. Buffalo are a little bit different, and they discovered this right in action. That bull pivoted on his front legs, and what that allowed him to do was to whip around to get Leo from his head while protecting his back end with his legs, being able to kick with his legs because the only thing touching the ground was those front two legs. Well, that posed a huge danger for Leo, but Leo still managed to get out of the way. He pressured and pressured the buffalo. He would take a couple steps back, and then he would stand like a statue, waiting for Leo's next move. They then decided to send in Rogue. Rogue was a gusty driving dog, and he was going to be the perfect combination with Leo. He ran in there and they started working that buffalo, but naturally, the buffalo did not let Leo or Rogue get behind him. He always wanted to be faced forward to him, and whenever they tried to, he would pivot around. At one point, the bull had had enough. He didn't care who was there, and he just decided to start grazing. Well, they couldn't have that, so they yelled, "Get him up!" and then shot out Rogue. He went for that buffalo's head and grabbed the hair on the top of the head and bit, and that buffalo drove him sideways, and saliva went everywhere. Right then, he just took off. He didn't like that one bit. And the dogs took off after the buffalo right down the middle of everyone and cleared him out of that field. It could easily take 40 or 50 minutes to move one single buffalo bull. There were campsites with tents and trailers, and the dogs would have to read the situation along with the owner to try to make sure nothing got out of hand. And each new scenario that they tried provided new information for how these animals behave with these working dogs. At times, it could actually seem like the buffalo bulls were very intelligent and were actually working the dogs. They would take and they would push the dogs into obstacles like big rocks or fallen logs and trees, and they were pretty smart against the dogs. It was a true full-out battle. The entourage of dogs that they used would not have been complete if it weren't for this little working dog named Jake. Jake's working debut was at 9 months old when he took a 1,500 herd of sheep from the mountains of Utah to the mountains of Colorado. He was an experienced working dog that really had some guts to him. They knew he had what it took to go the distance, but what they weren't sure of was whether or not he could handle a freight train. They sent him out there, and sure enough, he worked amazing with the other dogs. It was a true team. They tag-teamed these buffalo back and forth. Together, this team of dogs got the buffalo running with the ground thundering underneath their feet. Eventually, the inevitable did happen though. It was a warm afternoon, and the dogs had worked several bulls that day. Rogue went in to work one particular buffalo bull. Rogue was caught in between the piston strokes of that buffalo's hooves. As he was able to pull himself free, his left hind leg was limp, dragging behind. With true Aussie character, he spun around, ready to defend his position. He wasn't gonna give up until he was called off. His teammate Leo then rushed in and took the pressure from the bull off of Rogue so that Rogue could get out from under that buffalo. He had been gored. There wasn't a vet clinic for over 80 miles. The park ranger then scooped up Rogue and took him to the nearest medical facility. They laid him on the table and told him to stay while they steadied his head. The horns had tore deep into the flesh of his muscles. They irrigated the wounds so that the doctor could suture him up. With some major stitches and time to heal, Rogue lived to work cattle once again. What they learned on this project was that although working buffalo with dogs was possible, it wasn't necessarily the best option when it comes to working these powerful and stubborn animals. That being said, I know someone who is down in Oklahoma who works his buffalo, and he has quite a few, with miniature Aussie Shepherds, and he is very successful with that. He claims that because the dogs are miniature, it's actually an advantage. See, the problem with working buffalo is that when that dog comes in to work him, that buffalo sees it as a threat. He wants to take care of the threat. Well, the advantage to having a little tiny dog is that the buffalo really don't see it as a threat. They see this little thing yipping at their heels as more of an annoyance than anything, and they just want to get away from it instead of turning and trying to gore it. And so this gentleman, although I think it's an outlier, has tremendous success when it comes to working buffalo with dogs. I guess you just have to have the right type, right? If you found this video interesting, click here where we talk about how buffalo can help save the planet. Now, I need to get back to cutting wood. We'll see you guys next time.